The top 5 Vikings to leave Minnesota and have success elsewhere. That's coming up on today's Minnesota Sports Rankem.
This is Minnesota Sports Rankem, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, and it starts now.
It's the show that settles debates and starts new ones. Hey, everybody, I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. You can find me on The Ron Johnson Show, the Minnesota Football Party, and on this program that has new rankings for you every single week. I'm joined by my sidekick, Luke Inman. He's at Luke_Spinman. He's a big part of the Minnesota Football Party as well, and he writes the NFL Draft Buzz newsletter here at Locked On. Luke, another week, another list.
Another Thursday, another great Rankem episode to pump out here with you today, Sam. You got a great idea here today with Dalvin Cook obviously playing elsewhere this year. Just how much is that going to sting watching him ball out in a uniform that isn't purple and gold? So can't wait to see your top 5 and compare and contrast.
You could do a top 5 list just for this offseason.
No kidding.
Because you're going to have Thielen, Kendricks, Za'Darius, Dalvin, maybe Daniil, Patrick Peterson, Duke Shelley might be going to the Raiders and balling out. So there's a lot of departures this offseason who could add to this list. But going back through Vikings history, who are some of the biggest they got away stories? We get into our top 5 in just one moment after I remind you that we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Make every moment more at FanDuel.com/Locked On. You can comment below too. We might forget one along the way. Who are some of the Vikings that got away from Minnesota and had success elsewhere? Luke Inman, we always give you the courtesy of starting first. Who is your number 5 on the list?
So I don't know about you, Sam. I really focused on the last 10, 15 years or so. I mean, there's guys like Tyrone Carter who left Minnesota. He balled out in Pittsburgh for a handful of years. Guys like, Brad Johnson leaves Minnesota, wins the Super Bowl with the Bucs, but really honed in on this last decade or so with my list. Having said that, number 5, kick things off. How about Jerick McKinnon? 3rd round running back drafted by Rick Spielman. Always loved the way he complemented AP with more of that quick, explosive running style. But anytime you're sharing the backfield, sharing snaps with a future Hall of Famer, you're going to be hard-pressed to get the playing time you probably deserve. And even though once he left, he still joined other running back rotations and committees, and he's never been the guy, so to speak. Seeing what he did last year with the Chiefs, scored 10 touchdowns, 9 through the air, mind you, just goes to show like how great of a talent Jerick McKinnon has always been, not just as a runner, but just an overall athlete. I remember him coming out of Georgia Southern, actually, when he was drafted. He played running back, quarterback, and even cornerback, and he was never really able to make like a huge impact here in Minnesota as far as touches go. But Jerick McKinnon, man, despite hitting the daunted 30-year-old mark for running back, still doing big things. Doesn't show any signs of slowing down anytime soon. Even got a Super Bowl ring in the process. So I'd say he's doing okay since he left Minnesota. The Jet, number 5 on my list.
Yeah, and he's not in my top 5, but he would be in my honorable mentions, right in the same zone as Cordero Patterson, another versatile offensive piece that won a Super Bowl when he moved on, kind of reinvented his role and what that looked like. That's another honorable mention for me. But my number 5, someone by the name of Culpepper. Brad Culpepper. Yes, not Dante. We're talking Brad Culpepper, the 10th round pick in 1992. Luke, he spent 2 seasons with the Vikings. He made 2 starts and then went on to play for the Buccaneers. And he was great with the Buccaneers. A defensive tackle. He had 33 of his 34 career sacks after he left Minnesota. 6 years on a very good Bucs team. 33 sacks, Luke, in 6 years as a defensive tackle. That's pretty darn good. But here's my favorite part, is that Brad Culpepper went on to play in my favorite all-time reality show, Survivor.
Yes.
And he was a great player on Survivor as well. And not representing the Vikings, representing the Bucs, of course, because, hey, The Vikings cut him loose, and he went on to Tampa Bay and was a great defensive tackle. So we're going back over 30 years there, but Brad Culpepper cracks my list number 5.
Survivor fan as well. Season 27, Brad Culpepper finished 15th. Blood vs. Water. Go back and check that one out. Number 4 on my list, kind of a lot like Jerick McKinnon, the fact that got the all-around skill set, the coaches love, pure athlete. And even though Cordero Patterson was drafted as a wideout, it was so clear the way you maximize this guy's talent by just finding a way to get the ball in his hands. And it was so frustrating here in Minnesota for fans watching him get force-fed in the passing game when all along the team should have known better and used him first and foremost as a running back. Obviously made a huge impact on special teams. Still to this day, he's doing that. Number 1 kickoff return man in NFL history with 9 touchdowns. 5 of those happened here in Minnesota. But more impressive, what he's been able to do now in Atlanta as a true in-between the tackles running back under Arthur Smith. 3 All-Pros since he's left, Sam, in the return game. But just in the last 2 years in Atlanta, almost 2,000 yards on offense and 19 touchdowns. 2 seasons just on offense between the run and the pass game. Just turned 32 years old. Because he started off his career maybe a little slow offensively anyways from a snap share stand count, I think he may still have another few great years left in the tank for the Falcons. Flash, number 4 on my list.
Man, Flash and Jet were on the same team together, Luke Inman.
Especially at the price it would have cost. You didn't break the bank. I mean, that's a tough one to swallow for fans, watching him still thrive in the league for the Falcons all these years.
Yeah. Having McKinnon and Patterson, not for 1, but for 2 years together and not really figuring out a way to maximize them. That's a disappointing look back into the Mike Zimmer era for sure. And the Norv Turner era. I blame Norv just as much as I blame Mike Zimmer. My number 4, let's go back to 1994, another blast from the past. This one's significant because he's a first-round pick. Dwayne Washington, cornerback. First-round pick in 1994 of the Minnesota Vikings. This is just a guy that played out his rookie deal in Minnesota and then moved on. He played 4 seasons with the Vikings, had 10 picks, and then went on to Pittsburgh and had himself a career. 92 starts as a Steelers cornerback, 19 interceptions, including 14 of them in the first 3 years, couple of touchdowns, fumble recovery touchdown. Just a really good all-time player for Pittsburgh. And I assume if you talk to a Steelers fan, they would say, oh, yes, Dwayne Washington, loved that guy. Kind of the way that we look back, Luke, at a Robert Griffith or an Orlando Thomas, someone like that from around that era. Dwayne Washington had most of his success with Pittsburgh after being a first-round pick by the Vikings. So he's the number 4 on the Vikings that got away from the franchise. What do you think?
I respect you went in the archives a little bit further, did a little bit more deep digging. Again, last 10, 15 years for me, number 3 on my list, Stephon Diggs. No need for the long breakdown here. Obviously, the bar was set so high once he left, and rarely do those types of moves pay off where not only that guy continues to play at a high level, but the team that ships him out, the Vikings obviously, comes out ahead too. Vikes obviously got Justin Jefferson in the equation when it was all said and done. But Diggs in Buffalo has been an absolute baller, man. He's really helped Josh Allen take his game to the next level as a passing quarterback, which if you're a Bills fan, that was worth its weight in gold alone. Multiple Pro Bowls, and without a doubt, one of the top 10 wideouts in the game, if not top 5, arguably, maybe one of the best route runners in the NFL as we speak. In fact, who's your top 3 or 4 route runners, Sam? I mean, Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, JJ, Cooper Kupp. Stephon Diggs is right there in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to add to that list. I think that you hit it on the head there. He is one of the great players in the game, and it's unbelievable the Vikings found a way to replace him. Not only, 1 for 1, but maybe even getting a little more value in Justin Jefferson than Stephon Diggs had. One of the great trades in NFL history, if we were doing a rank 'em on that particular topic. Before I give you my number 3, a reminder that we're brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's an official sportsbook partner of Locked On, and just because the NBA is done, the NHL's done, you can still bet baseball. You can still live bet the U.S. Open in golf. You can bet the WNBA. There are hundreds of ways to wager at FanDuel Sportsbook. The app is very secure and easy to use, or you can go online, access FanDuel.com/lockedon. If you're a new customer, you can get a no-sweat first bet, up to $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Yes, $2,500. Again, that app has good promotions all the time. In addition to that, no-sweat first bet, so check those out. You get paid instantly when you win. It's the best place to wager this summer. It's FanDuel Sportsbook, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more. My number 3, Luke, you touched on him in your honorable mentions, Brad Johnson. Number 3 on my list. Now, Brad Johnson had a healthy Vikings career and, in fact, had a better winning percentage with the Vikings than he did with the Buccaneers. He went 26-23 in 49 starts with the Bucs, 28-18 in 46 starts with the Vikings. Former 9th-round pick. Very good value for that draft pick. But this guy went on to be a Super Bowl champion, and that's going to hold a little bit of weight. He had a really good year in 2002. 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He was the perfect quarterback, Luke, on a team that didn't need elite offensive play. They just needed you to not screw it up because their defense was so darn good. And Brad Johnson was kind of the perfect high-end game manager quarterback that season. Really didn't need to do anything fancy in the playoffs, Luke. They won their 3 playoff games by 25, 17, and 27 points. A cakewalk to a Super Bowl. Brad Johnson got a ring shortly after leaving Minnesota.
Love it. Number 2 on my list, a lot like Stephon Diggs, who kind of left with that bar set so high, but still not only reached it, but exceeded it and more, which is wild to say when you're talking about somebody like Randy Moss. But it's true. I mean, sure, he had the lost years in Oakland like everyone does. You go to Oakland, forget about it for a year or two. But when this man got to New England, game over. Brady to Moss, that phrase still lives rent-free in those fans of the AFC East for all those years. Those two were quite literally unstoppable, Sam. Even against the best DBs in the league like Darrelle Revis Island. Twice a year, Moss owned him. The bar was high, but he shattered those expectations, which I think speaks volumes to just how dominant Randy Moss was in New England. Obviously, as a Moss fan, a little bummed he didn't get a ring despite going 18-0 that magical season. But it's one of those things that Randy Moss will always be a Viking at heart, but would have been great to see him finish out his career in Minnesota and not have the messy divorce like they did.
Yeah, Moss is, I think he's going to be on this list forever. You would have loved to see Moss be, if not a career-long Viking, more of in an Adam Thielen sense, where it's everyone's still friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone was still cool with each other, and I don't know if it's always been cool with Randy Moss in Minnesota. Stephon Diggs is my number 2. Stephon Diggs, 3-year stretch with Buffalo, 338 receptions, 4,189 yards, 29 TDs, taking his game to an entirely different level. And Luke, he was kind of borderline 1,000-yard receiver in Minnesota most of those years. You said to yourself, well, this guy's really good, but he gets banged up a lot, and he usually ends up with 800, 900 yards. You know, what can he really do in the NFL? Can he be an elite alpha? Well, yeah, the answer was absolutely yes, he can be. Vikings fortunate to get a first-round pick. Justin Jefferson comes with that, and the rest is history. But Diggs in Buffalo, on average, over 100 receptions per year, about 1,400 yards per year, about 9-10 touchdowns per year. What a run. And he's another guy who's been in the news, kind of disgruntled there in Buffalo, perhaps. They say it's resolved now. We'll see what he does in 2023. But he's my number 2. And I'm dying to see who your number 1 is, Luke, because I can't immediately think of who it might be because you've already done Diggs. You've already done Moss. Who you got?
Sam, if you had to pick one thing that has plagued this franchise in big moments in the last 30 years, what's cursed this team in crucial situations and critical junctures to get them over the top and into the promised land? What would it be, Sam? What would it be? I know
who it is.
It's kicking.
It's kicking.
Gary Anderson to go to the Bowl. Blair Walsh, chip shot in the playoffs. Even Greg Joseph in Arizona a few years back. There's a million of them. So knowing that, what if I could tell you, you could draft the best kicker to come out in years, and all your kicking troubles and nightmares would finally be laid to rest. Every year, you could go into every new season knowing, well, yeah, I got a hole at D tackle. I got a hole at wide receiver 3, but at least I don't have to worry about this kicking situation. We're all set there. What a luxury. What a monkey off your back that would be, right?
That'd be nice.
Then what if I told you the GM actually did the impossible? He did draft you the best kicking prospect to come out in years, and now you got him. And sure, you're going to have to go through some rookie lumps along the way, a few speed bumps, but you just have a little patience. You'll be rewarded with a top 2 kicker in the league for the next 10, 15 years. Obviously, I'm talking about Daniel Carlson here. Yes, he missed 3 kicks in Green Bay, was immediately cut, then links up with Vegas, turns out to be a Pro Bowl player ever since, and he's still just scratching the surface of his peak, of his prime. It's unbelievable, Sam. This is why bad teams stay bad. And as much as I love my Vikings, and as much as I appreciate all the great things Mike Zimmer did during his tenure here, cutting Daniel Carlson after 2 games will live rent-free in my head for the rest of the time. This team could have rid themselves of their kicking woes once and for all, and instead, they kicked him out the door. No handshakes, no hugs, no severance package, just a cold boot to the curb. Thanks for the memories, Daniel Carlson. 8 quarters of NFL action we got out of you, and now we pay the price every offseason. We go into every new season wondering who's going to win this new kicking battle competition. It's a plague, Sam, and the Vikings can't get out of their own way sometimes, but Daniel Carlson, my number 1 with a bullet, because what that kicking position means to this franchise, all the bad memories they could have rid themselves if they just had a little bit more patience. I mean, how many games a year do you think is decided by a kicker? 2, maybe 3? What's that worth?
Recent Vikings history, 4, 5. It feels like Greg Joseph has been under the gun so many times with those last second kicks, and it feels like he's about 50% with them.
Sure.
But a lot of games have come down to his leg. That's such a good answer. I mean, my number 1's Randy Moss. I think Daniel Carlson's the better answer. That's the low key one, because he only played 2 games, Luke. Yeah. 2 games in Minnesota. And you know what? Credit to Oakland, now Las Vegas, because in 2019, Carlson wasn't that good either. He was only 73%. It took him a couple years in Oakland. And then once they went to Vegas, maybe he's just really comfortable on the Las Vegas Strip, because starting in 2020, 94%, 93%, 92% on field goals, hasn't missed more than 3 in a season. And his extra points are spectacular as well. So, yeah, that's a wonderful answer.
It stings, man. I mean, what's an elite Justin Tucker worth as far as game goes? So Joseph hits 50%. Okay. So let's say a Justin Tucker type hits 92, 93% of those game-winning kicks. I mean, that's an extra game and a half, potentially 2 games every year. That's the difference from winning 8 games versus 10 and getting into the playoffs every year. The impact of cutting this man way too prematurely, that could haunt this franchise for another decade plus.
Yeah, it's a great answer. A little more on Moss, who is my number 1. I did have to waffle a little bit between Moss and Diggs. Now, remember I gave the 3-year Diggs stat line? Yeah. So Moss, 2007 through 2009 with New England, 250 receptions. Diggs had 338. Moss, 3,765 yards. Diggs had 4,189, so about 400 more. Big difference in touchdowns, though. Randy Moss, 47 TDs to Diggs' 29. Randy Moss kind of took the bomb, the deep ball that Cunningham and he invented, and brought it to Brady in New England and kept it going. He set the touchdown record in 2007. I think he did.
21, 22 touchdown receptions, something crazy like that.
Yeah,
broke Jerry Rice's record.
Potentially, yeah, an insane, and that was the perfect season. And if they finish off that Super Bowl, Moss would have had the game-winning touchdown. Remember, he's the one who scored before Tyree had the helmet catch, and then Burris had the go-ahead TD for New York. But I still think that Moss, based on what he represented to Minnesota, having to watch your ex go and have that much success with their third spouse, because Oakland, that was the rebound. That didn't go very well. But then settling down with New England, the most successful franchise of the 2000s, and becoming their star, that hurt. That really hurt. And I think because you didn't have a Justin Jefferson to replace him, you had Troy Williamson. I think it hurt a little more than Diggs. So
23 touchdowns, 23 touchdowns, Sam.
Yeah.
In 2007, Jerry Rice, 22 touchdowns in 1987. Just looking up the all-time most touchdowns in a single season. Do you remember who holds the record? It's not a receiver.
It's either LT or Sean Alexander.
LT, 31 touchdowns in 06. That was the year after Sean Alexander broke Priest Holmes' record in 2005 with 28. A lot of running backs on the list, but Randy Moss, 23 touchdowns. Unbelievable. Yeah, number one. Can't go wrong with Moss at number one.
Yeah, if I had to do it again, I'd probably find a place for Daniel Carlson, though. That was a very, very good choice on your part. I also jotted down Terry Allen as an honorable mention. He had a couple 1,000-yard seasons with Washington, and he had a 21 touchdown season as well with Washington after leaving Minnesota. Terry Allen, the running back.
Yeah.
Fred Robbins, low-key, second-round pick for the Vikings, went on to New York and had 32 sacks in 8 years as a defensive tackle, 109 starts after leaving Minnesota. So Fred Robbins, kind of a sneaky one there.
Yeah, just honing on the last 10, 15 years. I thought about Percy Harvin. He really didn't do much in Seattle, but on the big stage, he takes that kickoff back in the Super Bowl. He has 2 long rushes for like 60 yards, grabbed a couple balls as well. Probably the offensive Super Bowl MVP. Kind of dismantled a little bit in Buffalo those final few years, but he came to mind. Jaron Kearse has been rock solid for Dallas over there. 7th-round pick, obviously. Mike Zimmer got his money's worth here in Minnesota, but still kicking it, still getting starting time and a lot of snaps over there in Dallas in that secondary. You always think about Teddy B. I know he's kind of the journeyman now, quarterback 2, but Teddy B's road after Minnesota has been an interesting one. Had some down years for sure and some down moments, but plenty of up moments as well. Plenty of good moments. There was one guy I kind of forgot about. Anthony Harris kind of did the opposite. He left Minnesota on a high note, signed that big contract in Philly. Boy, he really disappeared really quick, didn't he?
Maybe did Marcus Epps take his job? Because Marcus Epps could be on the list.
He did. Marcus Epps took his job. Marcus Epps coming from that Spielman regime there. Yeah, same draft class as Oli Udoh and Blake Brandel and all those guys. Couldn't make it to the 53 on the Vikings roster, obviously, but goes to show Rick Spielman knew what he was doing more times than not all hits, but he could find those talented guys on day 3. It was just up to the coaches to find a spot for him.
Great list, Luke. Great show once again. It's Minnesota Sports Rankum, the show that settles debates and starts new ones. He's on Twitter at Luke_Spinman. I'm at Sam Ekstrom. Friday, we have the Locked On Sports Minnesota Roundtable with Ron Johnson and Reggie Wilson. So we'll talk to you tomorrow here on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Until then, he's Luke. I'm Sam. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share, let your friends know about the show. We'll talk to you on Friday.